Thank you everyone for joining us today for a discussion on mastering the art of project prioritization. This is a LeadDev webinar created in partnership with Swarmia. The webinar will last about 45 minutes, after which myself and the other panelists will head over to the LeadDev Slack to answer additional questions that you may have in the Effective Teams channel. We will also have time at the end to answer a couple of questions live. So if you have them, please submit them through the Q&A feature. It's sort of at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And again, we'll get to them at the end if we have time. So one of the questions that I get most often in my work is, why isn't my engineering team shipping? Now, that is usually a multifaceted answer that requires digging deeper, but frequently a root cause is a lack of clear prioritization or understanding of that prioritization, especially when you're looking across a variety of work streams. So my name is Allison McMillan. I'm an engineering leadership consultant, and I will be your moderator today. I want to introduce our four panelists. We have Jared, Jenny, Mary, and Rebecca. This is also an extra special panel because you can't prioritize without working effectively with product. So today our panel consists of 2 product leadership folks and 2 engineering leadership folks. So Jared McCree is the product lead for enterprise at Figma. Jenny Oken is an enterprise principal product manager at CH Robinson. Mary Moore Simmons is the VP of engineering at AgentSync. And Rebecca Murphy is the head of engagement and insights at Swarmia. They all have a variety of experiences at both large enterprise companies as well as smaller startups. So let's get into it. The first question that I want to talk about is just sort of different kinds of work streams that need to be prioritized. So, I think some that always come up are, tech debt versus new feature work. What are the other work streams? What are the other kinds of work that's come up that you've encountered before?
Yeah, so I'll start on this one. I think, as you said, I think the major things that people think about are new feature work or tech debt. One major work stream that often gets missed is actually refining existing features. So you put a feature out there and it's maybe a major feature, and then you get customer feedback on it that, oh, hey, this doesn't make sense, or oh, it's missing the small tweak. And so that's actually a thing that people often forget to plan for, is once you launch a major thing, you have to maintain that thing and you have to continue to iterate on it to make sure that it really provides customers the value that you're trying to get at. So that's one I think that people forget a lot when they're trying to capacity plan, as an example. Some other things that definitely come up are things like surprise work or urgent work. A thing that comes to mind for me a lot is some sort of outage or incident, and then follow-ups that come from outages or incidents so that you can prevent that from happening again. As well as, of course, bug fixes, some of which you just sort of budget time for, but some of which can be a little bit more urgent as they come up. And then there's what I'll lovingly call strategic leadership asks of something that's hey, I know this isn't anywhere in your roadmap, but here's a thing that's super urgent, or here's a partnership that we really want to go after, and how do we make this happen? And then of course there's dependencies on other teams, other teams that might be dependent on you, and things that you're doing sort of cross-team work for. Yeah, those are the things that come to mind, but I'm curious if anyone else has other thoughts. I know I just said a lot of things.
Yeah, one thing I've been thinking about recently is making room for opportunity exploration, because you don't just want to be doing the work that you need to do. You want to be discovering what would it take for us to add, I don't know, AI is the hot thing, right? But I think that planning for that kind of innovation, discovery, opportunity, exploration, for a healthy team that's interested in kind of long-term sustainability, that's another important thing to make time for. Not necessarily there's a ticket for it on the board that somebody's working, but making sure that there's time within a quarter or within a planning period to do some of that work too.
I'll add 2 additional ones. One is operational excellence. I know that we always tend to be responsive to HPIs and things like that, to high priority incidents, but we tend to not make time for actually creating new operational modes, dealing with Datadog, making sure that we're meeting those needs and fixing the problems long term. But the other thing is I would call team dynamics. I think it's really important to make time for the team to learn about the business, for the team to learn how to work with each other and talk about how and not just what, and kind of do some of those things which aren't sexy and aren't what the business wants to hear about, but we have to make time for.
Yeah, if I can add something that I think about, especially with my teams, is, how do we grow with existing customers, and then how do we land new customers? So when thinking about growing with existing customers, a lot of supportability issues are something that comes up. Like, where do we see a high ticket volume? What is stressing our support team out, which is also stressing our customers out, and making sure that we prioritize that. But in landing new customers, also compliance and security needs come up. Obviously, we all need to abide by CCPA and GDPR, but when trying to go into government clients, you have to have, a lot of them need FedRAMP compliance. And so prioritizing that allows our company to expand it in new markets. So I'd say supportability and compliance are also two work streams we think about.
I realized
so just a few things.
I realized I forgot one more thing, which is actually like learning and development time for your team. So giving them space to learn a new skill or learn something that they need to learn for the next project. That was the thing I totally forgot also.
Yeah. So, just a couple of things to keep in mind and to plan for and to track all at the same time. So given sort of all of those different work streams, all of those different things to think about really simultaneously, right? Because all of these things have to happen within a quarter, have to be incorporated within a quarter or within a half year. What information do you like to bring to the prioritization conversation that makes it easier to discuss, resolve, align, sort of figure out, okay, how are we making this final decision? What is this final decision going to be?
I'll jump in on that one. I think there's multiple different prioritization conversations, and there's one that kind of ends up at the team level. But if we zoom out a little bit, we first need to come with the team and talk about where our capacity is, where our velocity is, and then how much of our time we need to reserve on the team for things like HPIs, for OpEx, for team learning, for onboarding, all of that, and take that off the top. Because if you don't take that off the top, it will never come out. Because what you have left is your time for your stakeholders and business needs, and that will fill. And then when I'm going and talking to stakeholders, that's where the point where I'm going to really use a prioritization matrix with them. So all businesses have different reasons why they're prioritizing different things, whether it's the business line, whether we're looking to make money or protect money or save money, where we're trying to expand, where we're trying to contract, what's going on in the market, which clients are most important. Those are all of the things that are going to come into a prioritization matrix that when I'm sitting down with our business partners is really going to lead our conversation. Because what they should be bringing to me is, hey, Jenny, if we do this feature, we're going to show up this way in RFPs. We're going to see this kind of growth. We're going to see this kind of retention of clients. And if we don't do this, here's the costs to the business. And then I can balance that across multiple stakeholder groups, because it's never going to be all of my stakeholders in one room wanting the same thing. I'm going to have to balance between the different groups, the different divisions, the different segments, to make sure that we're getting the right balance to meet the business needs. And I'm really going to be looking to my business partners to provide that business information and then bounce that against some of the other things I know inside our team. So then once I know the business needs X, then I'm going to come back to my team and I'm going to say, okay, we need to build this epic. Within that epic, where are our dependencies? Where are the things that, is our 80-20 line? Where are the things that if we don't do it now, we're going to regret it later? Where's our security model kinds of things? And then where's our joy? Where are we going to have fun building these features to make sure we're not just drudging? Because we can build things in a way that's drudgery.
Jenny, I really like the reference you made to, what's the cost of the business, what's the benefit to the business. I think about this as an engineering leader. I think about this a lot when I'm trying to figure out how to advocate for tech debt specifically, of how do we advocate for this tech debt that is not something that maybe necessarily makes the business revenue, but it's something that will save the business money or make us more efficient or allow us to get out more features in the future. And one thing I think some people don't always like the way I approach this, but I believe that if you're creative enough, you can really put everything down to either like a dollar value or an opportunity cost to the business. And I know people sort of struggle sometimes to like put that into dollar amounts, but I think with some creative thinking, it's often possible to really equate everything to some sort of business value.
I struggle with that too, Mary. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I've gotten more comfortable in my career about is it's okay sometimes to make up those numbers, even if as long as there's data behind them, because we have to realize anybody who's coming and saying this will make the company $2 million, there's also like, there's logic behind it, but that number is made up. But let's just use the same logic every single time we make up the numbers.
Educated guess.
Educated guess. It's a guesstimate.
Oh, this is so uncomfortable as an engineer to like make up a number.
Oh, I know.
Yes, I've learned this too, that sometimes that's what you do.
Jenny, I really love the joy part. There's plenty of stuff we can bring to any prioritization. I mean, what are our company goals? What are our team goals? What are our capacity? Are we helping customers? Are we helping internal stability? But that joy part, I mean, I really love that you prioritize that as well. I think working on especially enterprise features, at times I've gone into companies, they're like, this isn't fun. But like something I always try and just impress upon the engineers on my team and just the people I work with is that the work we do can impact thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of people on how they work day to day. And there's a lot of joy when you change something and you hear from your users or your customers, like, that's exactly what we wanted. And trying to factor that into the prioritization conversation, like, I love it. I'm really glad you mentioned that. It's awesome.
Yeah, so I think that sort of leads really nicely into our next question, which is like, you're all leaders in this space, right? And so you talk about prioritization frameworks, prioritization, and you have sort of these high level views of, assigning a dollar amount or an opportunity risk but, I think a lot of this is how to empower engineers so that they can sort of make some of these decisions on their own. And so I'm curious, we look at these things from a high level, but as you're sort of talking to ICs, as you're communicating with ICs, how do you set individual contributors up so that they can, be empowered and they can understand enough and they can be making some of these decisions on their own?
Oh, I'd love to take that one. I love that question. And as a product manager who was first a software engineer, it really means something to me. I think empowering engineers to make decisions contributes to a high impact team that we all want. And personally, as a PM, if we're able to work more autonomously, it allows us to work more autonomously, but we're all swimming towards the same goal. And so in my experience, for engineering to feel empowered, they must understand what we're working on and why to feel confident in making decisions, especially as like development progresses. And I'll give an example of like kind of how I do this in an environment when developing new features and how it empowers engineers. Like there's really 3 high level things I'm looking to do. 1 is provide context, 2 is define the goals, and 3 is clearly communicate. So like 1, providing context. I need to, as a PM, provide a clear understanding of the problem to be solved. How does this project help our company? How does it help our customers? Who is this project for? My purpose here is to define the why behind the project, because when engineers understand the why, they can make informed decisions and feel more bought into the project. The second thing is defining goals, like clearly define what success looks like, specify what needs to be achieved and how we want to solve the problem. And all this is done collaboratively, in typical EPD squads, product defines what we work on and why, engineering determines how and how long. And how this looks for me as a PM is it's my responsibility to ensure that everyone is aligned on what we're building for, or what we're building and who it's for. But typically for like technical decisions and implementation details, I default to being an observer. Like I care, I want to be informed, it matters, but engineering needs to make the decision on the code base and infrastructure that they're ultimately creating and maintaining. But we work together to align on those goals. And a quick side story, I used to have a Post-it note on my computer that said, "You are not an engineer." And it was just to remind me that I'm a product manager and I don't want to be stepping on my teammates' toes. I need to get out of the way. And the last thing is clear communication. Just as a PM, I want to make sure that everything is clear. We have a clear feedback loop, but this is also like how we define like how to make decisions during a project. And for me, typically, like if we're in the middle of a project and a decision impacts how our customers are going to experience the product, our target date, if there's new scope, or it impacts other teams, like, yeah, let's have a conversation synchronously. But otherwise, make the call, post your updates async, and we can adjust as we go on. Because you don't want to be so draconian that you're just there for everything. You need to trust your team. So yeah, I think I was talking too much there, but those are kind of the three things. Provide context, define goals, clear communication.
Two things I wanted to add to that. One, I needed that post-it note when I transitioned to product manager for a little bit. Definitely could have used that. But two, one of the things that I've been an engineering leader and a product manager in my past lives. And one of the things that I found around this communicating with the team is like if you're using OKRs, the OKRs that you're showing up to the business are informative and valuable and everybody should understand them, but they may not be the thing that resonates with the team and gets the team excited. And so I'm not saying you need like 3 versions of your OKRs, but I definitely found it useful to talk to the team in terms of like, what would make us high five at the end of this quarter? What would, I wrote an internal blog post long ago about like the high five OKRs, like that should be your standard for your OKRs. But yeah, I think making sure that you're putting stuff in the language that the team understands and that resonates with the team, that's kind of an important job of both the product and the engineering leader, is to translate that into things that the team can get excited about. I think this is especially true at a small company. We're all excited about getting more customers, right? More customers, more revenue, more logos, very straightforward. At bigger companies, that there can be increasing distance between the kind of what your team needs to work on and that shiny, end customer experience. So I think especially larger companies, it's important to make those goals real and tangible for the people who are working on them.
I'll throw in one more here, which is being really clear on who the decision maker is. So I've had this conversation with engineering partners of like, no, that's the product manager's decision. I know that you're really passionate about infinite scroll, but not your choice. And then I've also had conversations with teams where it's like, I'm not the person who chooses between SQL and Mongo for what our backend database structure is going to be. If you want me to make that choice, I will, and nobody will like it. So like in those conversations, you always have to be really clear, as Jared said, what's the what and what's the how, and who has the decision on those things.
Yeah. And I love, Jared, one of the things that you said, you were talking about listening to the team and hearing the team when they have thoughts about like how to architect things. And one thing that I think related to that is so important that product does all the time is listening to the team when they're saying, hey, if we build it this way, it's going to cause us a lot of pain. And that can be a conversation that results in like, we're still going to do this. Like, we know that it's like not the ideal choice, but we're going to do it because it's the right thing for the business. But that conversation between product and engineering on like, what pain does this end up causing back to the business, and is that acceptable, is I think another really healthy part of the conversation.
Couldn't agree more.
I have a follow-up question, but first I just wanted to mention that if you have questions, please make sure that you are asking them in the Q&A. We've had a few questions in so far, but we will have some time towards the end to answer questions live. So if you have them, just a quick announcement to make sure to click on that Q&A button and get them submitted. My follow-up question, and this is, maybe a little bit of a softball, but I think that it's still really important to say. We talked about sort of like communicating the why, the goals, success factors, etc. How many times and in what ways should these things be communicated?
Infinity ways.
Every ways. Yeah.
Yes. infinity ways
I actually have a
Early and
rule.
often.
I give it like a rule of three. So this is a thing I talk to managers about all the time, just because it's easy to remember. The real answer is infinity, by the way. But the answer I try to give to managers is you must communicate everything 3 times in 3 different methods, or no one's going to hear it. But you're right. It is the actual answer is it's constant.
There's never too
And
much. You'll be told. I've never had someone say this is too much.
You've said this too many times.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really hard lesson to learn. Well, it's a hard lesson for me to learn as a leader because it's like, but I wrote it down so clearly in that email that I told you to read. And like, no, and you get bored of hearing yourself talk about the same thing. But I think it's also important to like try different ways, not to actually use the exact same language, the exact same framing every time, because different framings make it through differently to different people.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
what I was like.
infinite the answer.
I was like, I'm going to ask this question. Everyone's going to laugh, but I also feel like we've all made the mistake of not saying things enough times in enough places. And so I feel like on a webinar like this, it's worth sort of like explicitly stating and explicitly like knowing it's in all the ways, all the different times, constantly, until somebody says to you, I've already heard you say that 5 times. Please stop telling me. Actually, and not just until one person says it, but until you hear it from like multiple people. And even so, you'll probably still have somebody that's like, this is the first time I'm hearing about this. So cool. And a slightly different topic, something that's pretty typical to now. So right now, a lot of teams have less headcount, or they know that headcount is going to be sort of remaining steady for the foreseeable future. But there is a desire to maintain or pretty often even increase productivity levels. So how do you manage this with your direct reports and then also with your stakeholders?
Definitely going to jump in on this one. Yeah, I think the first thing, I have a very visceral reaction to this first and foremost, and that is just like it's probably not reasonable to expect to do more with less in any you know, to any degree that truly matters. Like, yes, we can probably eke out some more value from individual engineers or whatever, but I think we do need to make our peace with like we just laid a whole bunch of people off. We can't do as much as we used to as an industry. At the same time, I do think that there are, and part of my job now is to talk to companies that are trying to figure out how do we maximize the value that we're getting out of the people that we have, which is a version of the question I like a little bit better, because even though more with less is definitely the catchphrase that you're hearing right now. But I think it's a great question of how do we maximize what we need to do. And one thing that I've seen a lot at especially larger companies, again, is that it gets to at a certain size, your leverage points start to be at the whole company or the whole engineering organization level, rather than like, let's make this team ship a little bit faster than they were shipping before. So I kind of turn this question back around or back toward leadership and say, how much are you willing to invest in making things better? If you got 1,000 engineers and you can throw, a team of 10 or 20 engineers at like, let's just make it so developers never have to wait for anything ever. And they can instantly, go buy a tool that lets them instantly discover everything that's been talked about on any platform internally for the last year. I think there are ways to drive more productivity, but they don't come for free. And I don't mean that just in terms of like you have to spend money on a tool, but you need to invest as a business in practices, tools, patterns, golden paths that make it so that engineers only need to focus on the interesting part of the problem that they're trying to solve, the unique part of the problem that they're trying to solve. I think a lot of companies really, they still they're like, but what if we didn't do that? How could we still get faster? And yeah, I think there's lots to do at the team level. And that's where your leverage really is when you're maybe a smaller size, is getting teams to really focus on what is slowing us down. What are our bottlenecks within our day-to-day work? Are we reviewing pull requests as quickly as like really mechanical basic things, looking at just like why are pull requests waiting for 4 days? Why did we reopen this ticket 5 times before it actually made it to production? Those sorts of things. So I think those are important conversations to have at the team level, so that air quotes down. And then the upwards is kind of explaining that there is real material benefit to be had for investment, but it requires investment. We can't do organization-wide improvements in our spare time.
Yeah, I think to your earlier point, just on the visceral reaction you had, I can understand that and go with it, because I think if you have a set number of engineers and you're working on a particular area and you remove engineers, it's not going to have the same output. The math doesn't math there.
I was going to say, this is math.
The math doesn't math. And I think that what comes in, at least for me as a PM, I'm thinking about prioritization. We need to be incredibly diligent about prioritization. What can we drop? What is the most value add with the team we have? But and while I think you can still operate with a high productive team, it's not going to be the same with reduced folks in the short term. Yeah. The math just doesn't math.
I will add to that, though, that there certainly are scenarios where you had 10 people working on something and actually 3 people working on it might have actually been better. It might be more effective. That's a strategic decision, not a like, let's cut 7 people and see if we can do better. But there are cases where a smaller team working more tightly together could be better than a large team where you've got 10 people working independently. Again, I'm not disagreeing with you at all, Jared, because yes, it is math. That if you have a healthy team and you take people away from a healthy team, that's like math.
From the project management side of this, I always think about the triangle, right? You got scope, you got resources, and you have time. And if you reduce one, you have to reduce one of the others and keep it a triangle. And I always look at that and I think those are actually all constraints. And then in addition to that, there's the business outcomes and there's quality. And those are the things that you're trading off. So we often think about this as like, if there's fewer people, we have to spend more time or we have to cut scope. But then the other thing that we also have to look at is if we actually change that dynamic, we're actually going to also have to change the business outcome expectations and the quality of what we're shipping. Those things are all interconnected. And if we aren't realistic about that with our business partners, we're setting them up.
Yeah, I like to think that if your leadership is being intellectually honest, then with you and with themselves, then the right response is exactly what everyone has said, right? Is that you show them the facts, you show them the data, and you say hey, here's what we can do with this capacity. Here's what we can do with this capacity. We've been talking about it. Actually, at my company, we've been talking about it a lot because we did do layoffs 6 months ago or so. And we have been talking about the mantra of doing less better. Let's do fewer things, but let's do them better than what we were doing before, because before everyone was doing too much. And so we were sort of half doing everything. And so I know maybe that's a hard thing to spin perhaps, but it's the thing that we've been talking about is how do we do fewer things better? Because what we ultimately end up with is better business outcomes because we're doing it right instead of sort of half doing everything.
All right, before we go to the Q&A, one last question. Let's talk about the tension between product and engineering, because I personally think that it should be there, but it should also be healthy tension. So what are your thoughts on that tension and sort of the effective ways you've worked with your counterparts that keep that tension in a healthy tension place and not in a combative tension place?
Ooh, let's bring the spice, Allison. I want this one. I think many of us have experienced negative tension between engineering and product, and we know exactly what it looks like. Constant conflict, poor communication, undefined goals, poor morale, and just ultimately an ineffective team. It's a lose-lose, and I want to avoid it personally at all costs. As a PM, for me, it's important to never forget that a large part of my job is about relationships. If I don't have a good relationship with our customers, I don't really know as well what to build for them. If I don't have a good relationship with my support team, I won't fully understand the problems our customers are having with our product. And if I don't have a good relationship with my engineering team, nothing gets built at all. Nothing. And so arguably to me, engineering outside of customers is the most important relationship a PM can have, IC or management. And I recently joined Figma, and this is one of the primary relationships I'm working on building. I'm working to understand my engineering team's working style, their current projects, what areas I can help with. But there's kind of like three overall things I want to align on, especially with my EM counterpart. What are our goals? How do we work effectively together as an EM/PM team? And then how do we operate as a team together? Because the more aligned we are, the more effective we'll be. And so again, like one, aligning on the goals. What's the charter? What's the business need for us to be successful? How do we prioritize tech debt? Like we're working collaboratively to understand, to answer these questions, to allow us to align on what success looks like. Again, the next thing, how do we work in EM/PM team? Like really defining what are our roles and responsibilities, things like roadmap strategy, stakeholder communication, because that is probably the most critical relationship to have. The clearer we are on our roles and responsibilities, the higher chance of us having like a smooth development process. And the last thing, how do we want to work with the ICs? How do we communicate both async and synchronously? How do we communicate with cross-functional partners? How do we align on decision making and documenting? And so with these three things, like it helps to lessen the negative tension and really you're just operating as a better team. If my EM comes to me and say, we have a lot of tech debt here and this is going to bite us in the butt, okay, we're working on it. And it's really coming down to how do we put that in the roadmap? It's not an argument. And so I think just kind of summarizing my points, that EM/PM relationship is critical. And I think probably one of the most important things to avoid negative tension.
Let me throw another one in there, Jared, which is show up as humans for each other. I've found that there's a lot of cases where like grabbing a beer virtually or in person can like just resolve a lot of things, and just spend time telling stories to each other about the worst interview you ever did. Like just terrible like work stories that are not about the job you're currently in, and be human to each other, because you can do almost any conversation once you show up as people. And if you get to a point where you're not seeing each other as humans anymore, then it's way easier to just get into the drama and the tension.
I have a feeling that I would not mind working with Jared or Jenny, based on your answers to these things. I have also, worked with PMs who, like, I didn't actually want to murder them, but the feelings were in that vicinity. And I think I took a couple jobs ago, I took the Crucial Conversations class, and I think that I wish I'd had that in my toolkit when I had these when I was working with more frustrating product managers, because like the idea of like figuring out what your mutual purpose is, like what do you both want? You both want something. You both want to get paid this week, at least that, right? And work upwards from there. But Crucial Conversations in terms of that, but also kind of building on what Jenny was saying, understanding like what is the other person incentivized by? Learn their ladder, learn how they are, how are they rewarded, how are they evaluated, who's evaluating them, what do they care about? And it's you can kind of study your opponent. I don't really mean that, but you can study kind of what's in it for them and what motivates them, and use that to inform how you're talking about things. And I think also like sometimes PMs aren't good. They're not a good fit for the culture or the company or whatever, and maybe they'll be really successful somewhere else. But I think another thing I've learned over the years is when something's really, 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 really not working, it's like it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to explain, in dispassionate ways how this is not working and how it's affecting the team. I've been in that position too. It's not fun. It's excruciating to see that play out. But not all situations are ultimately salvageable. Don't beat yourself up if you've given it an honest try.
Yeah, I was going to say, so one of the questions that I'm actually shocked hasn't come in through Q&A, but was, if you feel like your counterpart, your PM or EM is ineffective, what do you do about that? How do you work with that? And so I think that we've had sort of a smattering of those answers in answering this last question, but wanted to throw that out also if there's anything additional that anyone wants to add about, when your counterpart you feel like is just ineffective.
And I think it really needs to start with the definition of what ineffective is. Like troubleshooting this the same way you would do problem solving on an engineering problem or a client problem, right? Is how are they showing up that makes it feel like they're ineffective? Because remember, when you're talking about an EM or when you're talking about a PM, they're really sitting in this weird intersection between what the business wants, what the market and customers want, and what the team of engineers can do. That's a weird space. And there's a lot of people pulling you in different directions. And some people are really bad at managing that. And that might be how they're showing up. They might be over orienting to one way or another way. They might be not thinking deeply about how different people are working or having empathy. If that's how they're ineffective, then that can just become a simple conversation of, hey, I think you're missing this perspective. But if it's really coming down more to how they're showing up, and having managed a lot of PMs, I know that this also happens where you're coming in with an ego, or you're coming in with an idea of how things should be done and you're not listening, or things like that. That ends up being a personnel management problem. And that's where you got to use your hierarchy. And I think the same is true on the EM side. The EM side is really like fitting some of those same problems, right? They have the team that they're trying to manage. They have their leadership. They have all these metrics coming at them. They have the uptime and the OpEx and all of that. And then everybody's trying to balance things. So coming in with some sensitivity to that, and then really like trying to dig deep about what is ineffective. Some people are just bad at their jobs. That's a personnel problem. But before we jump to that conclusion, let's actually figure out what's breaking down.
Yeah, building on the crucial conversations stuff, and on that, like not nobody. I will not be so general, but mostly nobody wants to be ineffective at their job, right? So asking like, why is a reasonable person acting in this way that seems like clearly, unintelligible to me, but like thinking through why would a reasonable person be behaving like this? And yeah, please don't take any of this as like, no, just fire them and go hire another one. That's the easiest thing. Not that at all. But yeah, I think understanding what is motivating people and why, like, what is the reasonable story that they told themselves for why they're acting the way that they are. That story might not make sense to you, but at least you can understand where they're coming from.
All right, we're going to move to, I think we have time for a couple of Q&A questions. So the first one I'll ask is, doing fewer things better resonates, but the difficulty is that it's hard to keep everyone from backsliding to everything, everywhere, all at once. So how do you do that? And are there any tools that can be used to help?
I would love to take this one because I am totally fighting this battle right now. So yeah, definitely agree. It is, and also specifically at AgentSync, we have a cultural issue where culturally we are used to doing everything all at once. And so I have had conversations where I'm sitting down with an engineering manager saying, hey, the engineers on your team are telling me that you're doing too much at once. Can you do less at once? And they're like, well, like, I think we could fit this in. And like, I think, and it's like the people who are even supposed to be advocating for their teams are still struggling. And so there's sort of three things that I think help here. One is just validating that everybody is aligned at the leadership level, that is actually what you're trying to do. If you don't actually have alignment from the right leaders, then yes, of course, it's not gonna work. Because the leaders are usually the ones that are like, well, what if we snuck in this one partnership that's like super important, right? They're always going to give you side curveballs. And so returning to that and saying, like, are we all aligned that this is what we're doing and this is our philosophy? So that's one thing. The other one is creating, like, this may sound so simplistic, but creating just like capacity planning tools, honestly. And it's like pretty simple. I use a spreadsheet where I like help managers capacity plan for their teams and say, hey, assume X% of time on tech debt and then vacation. And then we approximately size all the things. And then we can show leadership like, hey, we can't do all of this. It becomes like a, hey, it's math, I don't know what you want from us type of conversation. And then lastly, like, I guess constant vigilance, like you're just constantly having to sort of reinforce the message, spot where things aren't people are trying to do too much at once, reminding them gently, trying to support them. But it is a very like constant vigilance thing also from a leadership perspective.
Jumping back to Jared's point before about context, I think that's really important. And right now, being in a very large company, I'm finding that like there's constantly messages coming at my team about the wider context of what's happening in the company. And I have to keep coming back to them and saying, we've drawn a box around this team. I understand all of those things are happening and you're reading all those emails and that looks like it's the most important thing in the company, but your box is this, and here's how it fits into the bigger context of the company, but don't go chase those squirrels, please. And that's been really effective for them.
Yeah, I think something that I've done as a PM is also just rebrand. Breaking old habits is super hard for the people on the team. It's also hard for the teams that rely on that team as well. And so if you're working with, less people and you're trying to focus on fewer things, you may understand that internally, but trying to tell everyone else, that can be difficult. And so something that I've done a few times in the past is really like change the team name, change the team charter, truly start up a new team. So it's for the old team and the old habits, you can almost cross that finish line and you're restarting again. Like when folks ask, who was doing that before? It's like, that's the old team. That team's gone. People are still here, but we have a new charter and we have a new purpose. And I think that helps to just kind of start over rather than changing the new. And I think it can be easier or harder depending on the company you're in, but I found that rebrand just helps to have a fresh start.
And building on what Mary was saying, I'm not going to promote our tools specifically, but there are tools, let's just say, on the market that will let you see, and going back to Mary, you were talking about kind of like categorizing stuff. We talk a lot about the balance framework where there's new things, there's improving things, there's KTLO, and there's improving your own productivity and figuring out what the percentage is going to be. I think the missing piece is often you make that plan. Do you hold yourself accountable to that plan? And are you like tracking, did you actually spend 20% on KTLO? Or did you spend 50 or did you spend 0? And none of those are good answers. So I think that there has to be some ongoing accountability, which ultimately can boil down to JIRA labeling. I don't know, it's kind of like a terrible answer, but ultimately can just boil down to something like that. Or again, tools to help you with this. But being able to have accountability throughout the delivery time, not just at the planning time and next planning time, but being able to see, are we working on things that we didn't plan on working on? Are we working on more or less KTLO or more or less new features? So I think that going to that question of like tools to prevent backsliding, you have to have that visibility on an ongoing basis. How are you tracking to that resource allocation plan? Not necessarily like how are we tracking just shipping this and shipping this, although that's important too, but tracking how are we doing based on that research plan. Are we spending our time where we said we would? And if not, like, where did that come from?
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. All right. Today we have talked about prioritization and teamwork and tough decisions. And we all know that prioritization is hugely important. Neither product or engineering can accomplish their goals and move the company forward without the other. And you can tell when prioritization is going off the rails, right? It leads to confusion, it leads to lack of productivity, leads to lack of shipping, all sorts of other stuff. So hopefully today's conversation gave you some great ideas and pathways to continue improving the prioritization process for your team or at your company. Thank you all to the panelists for all the great insights and conversation. We will be heading over now to the LeadDev Slack and the Effective Teams channel. Please head there to continue the conversation, and we'll make sure to answer any Q&A questions that we didn't have a chance to answer live. So thanks all for joining, and hope to see you next time.